Trump administration, the DOJ and the FBI will once again become the premier crime-fighting agencies on the face of the earth.
We've been instructed to get after it, and that's exactly what we are doing.
As bad as the CR is, I believe allowing Donald Trump to take even much more power via a government shutdown is a far worse option.
Is it time for new leadership in the Senate?
Next question.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Tonight on America Decides, President Trump ventured to the Justice Department today and talked about his relationship to the department and, importantly, its relationship to him. This, by itself, is news. You see, presidents tend to soft pedal or pretend not to recognize the long-standing relationship between a president, the Attorney General, and the Justice Department. More on that in a moment. In the past 25 years, for example, only 2 presidents before Mr. Trump even traveled to the department. And both of those visits, we should note, were entirely ceremonial. George W. Bush to mark the naming of the building for Robert F. Kennedy, and Barack Obama to herald the retirement of Attorney General Eric Holder. Mr. Trump's visit was entirely different, and it underscored the fear that Mr. Trump will now use the Department of Justice as a tool for retribution or vengeance. That fear runs hot among congressional Democrats, some still inside the department, as well as many department employees recently ousted. The president, as you know, has signed nearly 100 executive orders and actions, and as a consequence, more than 100 lawsuits have been filed to block or curtail those actions or orders. The Supreme Court, with its 6-3 conservative majority and 3 Trump-appointed justices, may soon decide the extent of Mr. Trump's expansive view of executive power. The president's remarks today appear directed, at least in part, to that audience, the Supreme Court. The president ran and won, we should note, in part because he argued that America's legal system was out to get him via the Russia collusion investigation and federal indictments over his alleged mishandling of classified documents and seeking, as he did, to overturn the 2020 election. Mr. Trump said he was blameless, utterly and completely, and that reckless application of federal laws, not his underlying conduct, was to blame. His victory empowers him now to punish and reward. Before we get to that, a quick note on the history of presidents and their attorney generals. The position dates back to George Washington, and almost every attorney general from then to now has been a close political ally of the president. In fact, the few attorney general nominees who actually attracted opposition in public usually drew that ire because they were thought to be insufficiently loyal to the president. This is a couple of examples out of history. President Eisenhower's attorney general, William Rogers, looked out relentlessly for the political interest of Ike and his then vice president, Richard Nixon, navigating both of them through scandals large and small. And when Nixon finally became president, his attorney general, John Mitchell, was so wrapped up in Watergate-related activities of the president's re-election campaign that he was convicted of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and perjury. All presidents know their attorney generals well. What they do with that knowledge and how it shapes American justice is now up for grabs as much as it ever has been. I want to start tonight with Scott MacFarlane, who joins us from the Justice Department. Scott?
And Major, this was a speech that was, to a degree, unprecedented. It's been a decade since a president stepped foot in here to give remarks, and that was President Obama in a farewell address to his outgoing attorney general. But what was particularly provocative about these remarks is it had the feel, tenor, and to a degree, the content of a campaign rally. You know, they played the campaign soundtrack before the president walked in and after he walked out. He used some of the same lines we heard on the campaign trail so frequently in 2024, from references to Al Capone to references to his grievances with the legal system. He referred to U.S. attorneys under President Biden as evil and rogue. He referred to Judge Eileen Cannon, his appointee in Florida, as a wise jurist for dismissing his classified records case, and he referred to television news analysts as scum who should be illegal. He did all of this in front of the top leadership of the FBI and the top federal prosecutors in America.
Scott MacFarlane of the Justice Department, thank you very much. Ty Cobb joins me now. As you might remember, Ty Cobb was White House attorney during President Trump's first term and worked extensively on the Robert Mueller Russia collusion investigation. Ty, it's always good to see you. Did you listen to the president's remarks this afternoon? And if you did so, what's your top line response or takeaway?
I did, my friend, and I have to say, as a former Justice Department official and longtime prosecutor, my heart sank a little bit to see the Justice Department used as a stage for the functional equivalent of Cortez after vanquishing the Mayans while his people were carrying out the dead bodies, telling them how great things were going to be, and making it really plain to the world and the country that this is not an independent agency anymore. This is not an independent office anymore, the Justice Department. This really is his Secret Service. He's got Kash Patel and others lined for the vengeance that he made plain that he's after today. And I have to say it's a sad day for me.
Let me play you something that the Attorney General Pam Bondi said before President Trump took the stage. Let's listen.
He will never stop fighting for us, and we will never stop fighting for him and for our country.
The Attorney General saying out loud, we will never stop fighting for the President of the United States. Does that cross a line, Ty?
Well, she didn't even say that, Major. She said for him. So it's not even the office, it's the idol. And that's the tragedy here. I mean, if it was for the presidency, fine. The president's a constitutional office, and their oath, after all, is to honor and preserve the Constitution. That, of course, is not what's going on. This is all about idolatry. And as Emil Bove made plain in dismissing top Justice Department officials, including those who had loyally served the country by pursuing the evidence in the cases against the former president, President Trump at the time, cases in which, by the way, President Trump never contested a single fact or allegation in an indictment. All he contested was, his autocratic ability to do whatever he wanted. So I think it's sad. It's not what the Justice Department should be doing. It's certainly not the focus of the oath that they take, and it's not their responsibility to serve the man. It's their responsibility to serve the Constitution. And it's very dangerous, particularly when you have Article 1, the legislature, Article 2, the presidency, Article 3, the courts. The legislature has been neutered by cowardly Republicans. They're not doing anything to stand up to the president. The president has made plain he's going to run roughshod and may not even obey Supreme Court orders, certainly not going to obey district court orders, and lavishes praise over dim-witted partisan sycophants like Judge Cannon, which I think there's not a single person who's familiar with her, ever served with her, witnessed what she's done, who sees the virtues that he sees in her. It's really a sad day all around.
And Ty, what you just said about Judge Cannon, in his remarks at the Justice Department, the president said that should be illegal. Criticizing district or appellate federal judges should be illegal. He also threw the news media in there as well.
Yeah, of course, and he thinks a lot of speech should be illegal. Now that's a marked departure from the history of the principles that our country was founded on. But he's already demonstrated that in scooping up, the Colombian Palestinian demonstrator for suspect, reasons, hard to articulate legal reasons, apparently very hard to articulate because they really haven't been articulated, sweeping him off to secretly to from taking him from New York and putting him in a jail in Louisiana, to the frustration and anxiety of his 8-month pregnant wife. There are a lot of speech norms that are being broken here. There's a lot of stuff that he would like to make illegal, criticism of him being foremost among it. And of course, as we've seen, he's trying desperately to rewrite history by firing the prosecutors who did their duty and pursued the cases against him, trying to pretend that the January 6th people who violently attempted to obstruct the proceedings in the House with Mike Pence and endangering Mike Pence, that they were somehow political prisoners. I mean, this is really craziness, and I don't know why people think the emperor is clothed, because the emperor is very naked.
Ty, I want to ask you about something that you worked on directly with President Trump, and that's the Russia investigation. The president said today those who were involved in it were vicious and violent and should be prosecuted. I just want to level set people to remind them. There was a Department of Justice Inspector General investigation into this that found that it wasn't politically motivated by the FBI. John Durham did a special counsel investigation which yielded 1 probationary penalty for 1 person and 2 acquittals, meaning the underlying impetus for that investigation was subjected to all manner of scrutiny by the Inspector General of the Department of Justice and a special counsel. And almost nothing of merit was successfully prosecuted.
So I think it's hard to parse that. It's hard to simplify that. Obviously, there was, as we know, that the Russia investigation, although it was started under the pretense that there was, Russian collusion, the evidence later developed that was, bought and paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign with the assistance of the Perkins Coie law firm and others. There are nuances there that sort of require balancing out. But yes, I think the theory that it was somehow violent and otherwise inappropriate for Mueller, who never appeared to know about the initial facts that started that case in terms of the political efforts by the Clintons, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's no evidence that anybody associated with Mueller, with the possible exception of 1 or more of his staff, had any political motives. And I think they did a dutiful job. I worked very closely with Mueller and his staff. I found them very professional. I've always I've always been saddled with the fact that I may have represented Trump in one of the few things that he actually didn't do. On the other hand, I think it was an important process to go through and get out and get the facts out. But yes, I think what you say and what he has reasons to be bitter about what happened in connection with the initiation of that investigation and the money that went into buying the Steele dossier and other things. But he doesn't have a right to be bitter at all about being prosecuted for having classified documents in Mar-a-Lago, which he obviously did. In fact, he admitted it. I mean, when he was showing them to people, saying, I probably shouldn't show you this. This is wrong. Even Susie Weil was going to be a witness against him. So, as I said before, none of those facts are contested. It's only Trump's view of the world that he, as a former president and as president, is authorized to do whatever he wants, and that's going to be the confrontation at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is up to this. I think they didn't roll over on the birthright citizenship. They didn't roll over on other matters that have come before him. Trump's lost in court 45 times already in 7 weeks. So I think the courts are going to be up to this. Sadly, unfortunately, it's Article 2. It's the Article 3 courts versus the Article 2 president with the Article 1
legislative branch
on the sideline.
Right. Ty Cobb, appreciate it as always. Thank you, sir.
Great to be with you, Major.
The race is on to avert a government shutdown. It's probably going to be successful. Senate Democrats are divided over Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer's support of the GOP funding bill. So are some House Democrats. Caitlin Huey-Burns is following all of that. She'll have the latest from Capitol Hill when we come back, right here on America Decides.
The CR is a bad bill. But as bad as the CR is, I believe allowing Donald Trump to take even much more power via a government shutdown is a far worse option.
Welcome back. That was Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer justifying his support for the Republican-drafted government funding bill. It's called a CR, that stands for Continuing Resolution. That's how this gets resolved. The Senate is in the process of resolving this and will avert a partial federal government shutdown. We know this because just a few moments ago, it advanced a key procedural vote in that direction. We are joined now by our Caitlin Huey-Burns, my colleague, who is following all this on Capitol Hill. Caitlin, catch us up on where we are.
Well, it is in Congress if it doesn't come down to the very last minute. That's kind of where we are right now, Major. You know this well. We've been through this many times before. But I just came over here from the chamber where it appears that they are going to have enough votes to pass this thing. What happened was we've been talking all week about how Republicans would need at least 8 Democrats to come over to their side and vote with them against blocking this bill. They got more than 8 votes. They got 10, at least at this moment as we're talking to you. And Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, teed that all up yesterday. And what this has really done has caused a rift within the Democratic Party right now. That's kind of been the biggest story of the day up here. This budget bill, this funding bill, is now likely to pass later on tonight, averting a government shutdown. But Democrats are still trying to figure out where they go from here, given that they had to essentially fold here. And we had House Democrats come back to the Congress today to try to message and try to put pressure on Senate Democrats not to support this thing. And, you know, they really weren't successful. And I actually asked Democratic leader on the House side, Hakeem Jeffries, kind of where they are here. Take a listen to what he had to say.
If Democrats stay united against this, the government will shut down. What would you have expected Schumer to do?
This is not about one individual. This is about the American people. That's our view, right? We made a decision based on the 4 corners of this bill.
And it was very notable today, Major, that Jeffries was asked several times by reporters in that room whether he had confidence in Chuck Schumer, and he would not answer the question, which I think is very telling right now. You have a lot of Democrats who are upset with Schumer for providing this political cover to get this bill onwards. And Schumer's argument was, look, we are between a rock and a hard place right now. We don't have the leverage we think we do, and if we don't act now, the government will shut down, and that could be catastrophic for the very federal workers we're talking about protecting. So this bill will pass tonight, but Democrats still have a long way to go in figuring out how they message, strategize, unify from here.
And Caitlin, picking up on the last point you just made, and Chuck Schumer gave voice to this, his concern, shared by obviously 9 other Senate Democrats, that if there is a shutdown of any duration, it will empower Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency to go farther faster.
That's right, because it's up to OPM to decide, you know, who is essential and who is not, deciding kind of how government functions in a partial government shutdown, if that makes sense. So there was this concern among Democrats, especially voiced by Schumer, that a shutdown, in addition to all the havoc it could wreak on workers and the economy as well, that it would also further empower Musk. Democrats on the Senate side have been, you know, kind of making that argument as well as they've been trying to figure out where to go from here. And it's notable kind of breaking down the votes, the yes votes today from Democrats in the Senate. A couple of them are not running for re-election in the next midterm. So that also is kind of playing into this. And you're going to have this divide between a Democratic base that wants their leadership to really fight against everything that Trump is doing, and others who have to kind of be a little more practical here and look at the longer term.
Caitlin Huey-Burns on Capitol Hill, as always. Thank you very much. Dr. Mehmet Oz was grilled by senators today in his confirmation hearing that to run the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. Dr. Oz is a television host. He turned Republican politician, refused to commit to ruling out potential future cuts to Medicaid. Here was part of his exchange with Oregon Democratic Senator Ron Wyden.
I cherish Medicaid, and I've worked within the Medicaid environment quite extensively, as I highlighted, practicing at Columbia University.
That's not the question, Doctor. The question is, will you oppose cuts to this program you say you cherish? Time's short.
I want to make sure that the patients today and in the future have resources to protect them if they get ill.
Democratic discontent. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez slams Senator Chuck Schumer over his support, as Caitlin Huey-Burns just discussed, the Republican-backed spending bill to avert a government shutdown. Our reporter panel will join us next on that and much, much more. You're watching America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Good to have you still with us. Pretty evident the divide is growing between some Democrats on Capitol Hill. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York, keep that in mind, has been on the airwaves today making it very, very clear she's not on board with Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, also of New York, and other Democrats who just recently have put the procedural wheels in motion to pass the Republican spending bill and avert a government shutdown. Let's listen.
I cannot urge enough how bad of an idea it is to empower and enable Donald Trump and Elon Musk in this moment. It is dangerous and it is reckless.
I want to bring in our political reporter panel, Kadia Goba and Mariana Sotomayor. Kadia is political reporter at Semaphore, Mariana, congressional reporter for The Washington Post. So, Kadia, you were with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez today. She was pretty vocal. Is she indicative of the mindset of most House Democrats?
I would say most Democrats are very upset of how this shaped up, largely because many of them voted against this funding bill. So their reaction is, why do that? And then only for the Senate to turn around and support the bill.
And they had some at least nominal expectation that Senate Democrats would, for a period of time at least, hold the line.
Some sort of pushback. They just wanted Democrats in the Senate to fight just the slightest, just for all. I mean, she laid it, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez laid it out properly yesterday. She said there are a lot of vulnerable Democrats who put their district or put their name on the line all the time and vote in unison with Democrats. Why not give them some kind of respect and, you know, put up a sort of a fight?
So, Mariana, I want to play this soundbite. We started the show off with it. It's worth playing again because it's indicative of something going on. A question put to Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader.
Is it time for new leadership in the Senate?
Next question.
Is it time for new leadership in the Senate? Next question.
He was asked time and time again, multiple times, pressed on whether he thinks that Schumer is the right leader in the moment.
Answer. No, of course not. We're perfectly satisfied. Everything is good.
Yep. And he
That's
just kept saying, next question, next question, next question. I mean, listen, he is a New Yorker, right? He is someone who he is a very respectful kind of leader. I will say that. He tries not to elbow.
Yeah. Right.
He doesn't try to throw punches. It's very different. There is that level of respect. However, how should we be reading that? I am certain he and his team have a lot of thoughts as to how Schumer has handled this. And interestingly enough, Schumer actually ended up calling my Senate colleague Liz Goodwin this afternoon and kind of threw Jeffries under the bus a little bit. This was just after Jeffries was respectful about Schumer. Essentially what Schumer said was, you know, had I known, I've been talking a lot to Jeffries, had I known that Speaker Mike Johnson actually would have the votes and be able to pass this, I could have essentially started to talk to senators a little early. That's starting to ruffle some feathers, of course, among Jeffries' world, who very much have kept in the loop. I mean, we as House reporters knew for a majority of this week that the Republicans were going to be able to pull this off.
Defeat is always a place of plentiful recriminations, and the recriminations have already begun. But let's diagram the sentence a little bit here. And I was kind of cutesy about this in the read-in. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is rumored relentlessly, whether it's true or not, I want your insights on this, Kadia, to be considering a primary run against Chuck Schumer. Hakeem Jeffries is also from New York. They're all part of the same political family, more or less. Disturbances in that political family, in full public view at a time like this, will only add to the speculation about what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's actual motives and future plans might be.
Yeah, I think these three New Yorkers are in a very tight bond. And
generally.
Yeah, and at this point, I think they're in an interesting dilemma, I would say, in that there are, you know, who's to say that necessarily Hakeem Jeffries is always aligned with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? But yeah, there seems to be some tension. I would say, though, that AOC was very aggressively saying that this is not just on Senator Schumer. She's addressing all of the Democrats.
All the Senate Democrats.
Yeah.
Because if Schumer were by himself, there still would be enough Democratic pushback to at least force the Republicans to reconsider
That's right. He's not the only one that could force
Mariana, I want to talk to you about Jared Golden, the only House Democrat to vote yes on this Republican bill. What do they think of him in the Democratic caucus generally, and what does Golden think about himself and why he did this?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I guess not surprising to all of the House Democrats that Jared Golden, who has constantly at many different points in times broken with his party to vote with Republicans, would do this. My understanding into his thinking is he realized kind of a similar argument that Schumer made. This is not a win-win situation. It's a lose-lose situation.
And Senate Democrats ultimately are going to fold, and whether they fold on Friday afternoon or next Tuesday, it doesn't matter. They're going to fold. I can see that as clear as day.
Right. And listen, as much as Jeffries and his whip team were really good at making sure that a majority of Democrats fell in line, he is very keenly aware that the way to get to the majority, the way that he gets to become Speaker, is by making sure that those members who are in Trump plus 10, 12 districts vote the way that they have to vote. So it wasn't that surprising.
Let's not ignore the fact that I think the House was very aware that they needed 8 Democrats in the Senate to get this vote to the floor in the first place. So, you know, voting against the bill versus the government shutting down, I think that's a calculation that Hakeem Jeffries definitely considered.
And Mary, I want to give you the last word on this because it is worth taking a moment to notice that part of this whole Democratic House strategy, whatever it was based on an assumption that Mike Johnson would have a hard time, possibly an impossible time, passing this bill in the first place with only Republican support or maybe one Democrat. And he did. And he was in position to do it even without Jared Golden's vote.
Absolutely. I mean, it was impressive to see Johnson with the help of Trump, right? We've just seen how much House Republicans have struggled. This is the first time they've been actually able to fund the government, pass a funding bill on their own. And the reason why is because of Trump. That's becoming much more apparent to House Democrats. It makes it easier for them to be able to unite, except as you point out,
And when the basis of your legislative strategy is I think the opposition is going to fail, that has its own built-in problems. Mariana Sotomayor, Kadia Goldberg, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you at the table.
When Erskine and I go out on the road and we talk for 50 minutes and take questions, we'll get a standing ovation because we don't BS them. We tell them the truth. If you spend more than you earn, you lose your butt. And if you spend $1 and borrow 41 cents and do it every day it used to be 40 cents, it's 41 now, and keep doing it, you got to be stupid. If you can't learn to compromise an issue without compromising yourself, you ought to go home.
That was the late former Senator Alan Simpson, more than a decade ago, in his usual candid, honest, and often humorous way. The Wyoming Republican died today at the age of 93 after struggling to recover from a broken hip. The lawmaker was well known, and I covered him for many years for wit, sharp sense of humor. He was elected in 1979, stayed in office until 1997. Simpson built a reputation for making friends across the aisle, cracking up reporters on occasion, and promoting causes at times less than fully popular within the Republican Party Senate conference, including abortion rights, same-sex marriage. Alan Simpson, we mourn him. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to America Decides. Well, the numbers are in, and Tesla sales are down. Its stock price also down. And it appears the Elon Musk electric vehicle company has lost at least one previously satisfied customer in the United States Senate.
Every time I get in this car in the last 60 days or so, it reminds me of just how much damage Elon Musk and Donald Trump is doing to our country. So I think it's time for an upgrade today. So this is going to be my last trip in this car.
I want to bring in our political panel. Kevin Sheridan was former spokesperson for the Republican National Committee and a former senior advisor to Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign. Chuck Rocha, you know him and love him, senior advisor on Senator Bernie Sanders' 2016 and 2020 presidential campaign. So we'll get to the octagon match that's trying to be set up between Mark Kelly and Elon Musk in a second. But Chuck, I just want you to diagram or at least discuss the last 2 weeks for Democrats on Capitol Hill. Last Tuesday, even by their own admission, disorganized, disarray, resistance to Trump. This week, a completely expected cave-in on the government funding bill and averting a government shutdown. What is your assessment about Democrats tactically and rhetorically on Capitol Hill these last 2 weeks?
I think that when you're fighting all kinds of fights all at the same time and you don't have a leader, which is really key here, when you don't have one centerpiece that you can follow that says this is the one direction. You have something that looks like your hand, and every finger's fighting a different war. When you need your hand to be like this, if you're actually going to punch through the wall, because if you hit a wall like this, you're going to break your wrist. And Democrats need to come together behind one person, which is hard because we don't have a president. We don't have a majority in the House or the Senate. So I think there's a lot of Democrats doing a lot of good things, but it does look unorganized to the outside groups because out there they're fighting all different directions when they should be fighting one thing, and then you have Donald Trump with this megaphone who's out there kind of rolling roughshod over everything, not to mention Elon Musk.
Kevin, I rarely throw you an underhanded softball pitch as I'm going to now.
Oh, my God. Here we go.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Look, he had a bad hand and he played it badly. And that's
Schumer.
Yeah, Schumer. He should not have got himself into that position.
Suggesting for a moment yesterday that he was going to fight on this and Senate Democrats were going to stand tall.
It was so bad. Terribly played. He could have, extracted some sort of request from House leadership from the Republicans, but he didn't even try to do that. He didn't even get as
and
far
it doesn't
as,
appear he was well coordinated
box.
with House Democratic leaders.
They're not coordinated at all. He's got AOC breathing down his neck in New York. He's got Hakeem Jeffries not even endorsing him to stay in his job as leader. So, yeah, he's in a bad place. Democrats, it's indicative of where Democrats generally are right now.
All right,
they just don't have a message.
Yeah, that's a problem for Democrats. But I want to talk to you about something that I think should be problematic for any Republican who is generally inclined to support what Elon Musk is doing, because he continues to do and say things on social media that are not defensible. He reposted something that said Stalin, Mao, and Hitler didn't murder millions of people. Their public sector workers did. Kevin, what is that about?
Yeah, I don't know. I hadn't seen that.
I mean, come on. That is not only ahistorical, it takes out the agency of people who were, by their own words and deeds, setting all these murderous things in motion in pursuit of an ideological end.
Yeah, and he'll tweet something out or X something out that'll cover that up by in 2 hours. He's on X all day. I don't know how he has time to do it all and run 6 companies and do Doge. But yeah,
it's harmful. It's ridiculous. And do you think at any point, Elon Musk becomes a liability, either for Trump specifically or Republicans generally?
He hasn't yet.
Possibility?
There's always the possibility that Trump will tire of him, but right now I think he's doing a pretty good job of identifying waste, fraud, and abuse. He's exposing it to the Congress and to the American people. His Tesla stock has taken a big hit.
Huge.
So he may,
down 48%.
He may have to go back to that.
Since December 17th, down 48%.
Might be a good time to buy some Tesla stock, honestly.
Chuck, what do you think?
And I'll take that softball, throw it right over here, Major. I got it right here. I'll answer that question. It's doing horrible. The stock is doing horrible. And let me tell you one thing, even an old Mexican redneck from East Texas knows this. You know who buys a lot of Teslas? College-educated white people. You know the one group Democrats did really good with in the last election was college-educated white people in the suburbs who love their electric cars. And now, just like the senator, I'm never going to say anything bad about the senator, he could drive a space shuttle, for God's sakes. He's done with this group. So when you go after this group, that's why you're seeing that. And then, to tie it to the tweet, not to get too dramatic, then you start seeing why the Tesla stock has dropped in every other country in America. Hello, Germany. Why are you not selling as many Teslas? Because the old boys over here talking about it wasn't really the Nazis who killed all the Jewish people.
Kevin.
Look, he's had a lot of the criticism on that subject was, with the salute, supposedly, was just completely ridiculous and unfair. I haven't seen that tweet. That's the first since you should.
There you go.
Since you read it.
Take a look at it.
I'd have to know what kind of context he's even going for.
There's no context for that, Kevin.
I have no idea. I'm not going to defend it or explain it, but look, he's one of a kind. He bought the platform. He's saved free speech, and he's doing a lot of other things at
I want
the
to
same
ask
time.
you, before we have to go, and you get 30 seconds, and Chuck gets 30 seconds. All right, the government shutdown's averted. The next big thing for Republicans is tax cuts and spending cuts. What's your sense?
Yeah, they've got to get the big, beautiful bill going, and they've got to get it going quickly. This buys them time. Government will not shut down. I think they will come together on the tax provisions that he's talked about, extending his middle-class tax cuts for the American people. That will signal to the markets that stability's coming, and and predictability.
Chuck, you
is
heard
coming.
it. Stability's coming from Kevin Sheridan.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what's coming. No more town halls in person. That's what's coming because the American people have anxiety and they're worried about this and they're mad and they're really mad that 7,000 veterans have been fired.
Those aren't organic.
You just wait. You just wait. Organic or not, this does not play well for Republicans.
Those are.
Thus concludes this Friday episode of Softball with Kevin Sheridan and Chuck Rocha. Thank you, gentlemen, both very much.
Have a great weekend.
House Democrats rally against Democratic senators, that's kind of odd, who supported the Republican stopgap government spending measure. Say that 5 times fast. I bet you can't. We'll have more as they wrap up their annual legislative retreat. That was in Leesburg, Virginia. That's next. You're watching America Decides. Well, welcome back to this super fun Friday edition of America Decides, or maybe mildly amusing. Now, this is not in your personal calendar, but today was the last day of a 3-day House Democratic retreat in Virginia. It was on their calendars. They usually talk among themselves about strategy and plans, but today, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer was really on their minds. Let's listen.
They can get back to the table because they were really close until Trump said, no, 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 no. I like this idea of sending me something without any guardrails.
So any of my colleagues in the Senate who are considering voting on cloture, the American people are shouting, please do not hand the keys over to Elon Musk.
Oh, well, Senate Democrats have done that procedurally, and they're in the process within the next 25 or 30 minutes of working this through. Hunter Woodall joins me now. He was at that conference. What was the vibe there?
Major, what I can say clearly is that House Democrats were dejected. They got up on Tuesday. They took what they saw as a very hard vote to vote down, this Republican-led funding proposal. Only one Democrat, Jared Golden, voted for it.
And by doing so, they were opening themselves up, if the government did partially shut down, to the finger of blame.
Exactly, and that's a tough thing here. That's an easy vote to make on a Tuesday. Well, not necessarily an easy vote. It's a vote that's easier to make on Tuesday than on Friday when the shutdown deadline is hours away. But I haven't quite seen this widespread anger in the Democratic Party in a while, where you see both progressives upset, but centrists, moderates, frontliners in districts that they need to win.
Frontliners are those in competitive districts.
Exactly, that they need to win keep their numbers, but also win the majority in 2026. There's widespread discontent right now, and that's surprising.
And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, we've kind of obsessed about this today, because I know for many of you, the whole partial government shutdown is cyclical. It seems like a never-ending story in Washington. It doesn't have a lot of texture to it. The reason we're talking about it is because not only is it going to be resolved, that's important, but secondarily, the split within the Democrats will go to their either functionality or lack of functionality in the rest of the Trump agenda.
Major, that's exactly right. And you can't view all this, just in this moment. This sends so much of a signal to 2026, to 2028.
And to the Trump White House.
And to the Trump White House. But I think that, Democrats were so upset by the 2024 election results. And I think this is the first time where we've seen these frustrations, the root of those frustrations, really come out. They're saying we need to fight more. Our voters want us to fight more. House Democrats feel like they fought. Senate Democrats, I'm looking at what Senator Gary Peters of Michigan said. He called a shutdown with Donald Trump as president. He said it would have been catastrophic. And, that's the stakes here. And right now, there's that disconnect between voters and what the senators are worried about, amongst those 10 that voted to advance this.
And Gary Peters of Michigan, instructive, he's not running for re-election, but he was the most recent chairman of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. He understands where politics lies, not just in the past, but where it may lie in the future. And he was with Chuck Schumer on this one. Hunter Woodall, always a pleasure. Thanks so very much. Federal scientists, public land managers, and park rangers, just some of those who have been cut from the federal workforce, specifically at the Department of Interior, by the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Next, we'll speak to one of those now out of a job, but volunteering for that job nevertheless. That's next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. Last month, more than 2,300 probationary employees were let go from the Interior Department. That included 1,000 workers at the National Park Service and 400 employees at U.S. Fish and Wildlife. One fired Fish and Wildlife employee, Bianca Sisic, is still showing up for work for free as a volunteer. Why? Because she's so passionate about her job. And Bianca joins me now. Bianca is in her work truck and joining us via Zoom. So Bianca, tell us where you are and what you're about to do.
Yeah, so I'm out at Atwater Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge today, out in Eagle Lake, Texas, and we're working on building acclimation pens for the endangered Atwater prairie chicken. They're bred in captivity and then moved here, and so they need a place to stay so that they can get used to the prairie before they're released.
You're doing this as a volunteer, but you had a job as of mid-February. What happened to you?
Yeah, so I was the refuge biologist out here. I was the only biologist on staff. And then on February 14th, I received a call from my supervisor that I was terminated. It was very, very sudden. So.
And was there anything in terms of work evaluations or any signals at all before that date that you received suggesting your employment status was in any way jeopardized?
No, I had a performance evaluation in October after a few months out here, and I got very good ratings. I got exceeds expectations, and my supervisor and my coworkers have, talked about how much they love working with me and as a team. So when I got that termination notice and it was, implying that there was a performance issue, I immediately knew that that was not true.
And I understand that for your work, you need to be there every day. This is not a job you were doing remotely.
No, this is a job where you are outside in the field, almost every day, so.
And what is it, for the audience's benefit, Bianca, that you do now as a volunteer and you did previously as a paid employee of Fish and Wildlife?
Yeah, so as the biologist on staff, I largely focused on habitat restoration of the native prairie out here. The Texas coastal prairie is, a very endangered habitat as well. There's only 1% of the habitat remaining. So in order to help the species out here and help the endangered Atwater prairie chicken, you have to have a healthy habitat as well. So, that's what we're out here doing, taking care of invasive species, keeping it a prairie, keeping it looking good and beautiful, so.
And how endangered is that particular species, Bianca?
They are very endangered. They're one of the most critically endangered species in North America, actually. There's less than 200 remaining in the wild.
And what is it called again?
It's the Atwater's prairie chicken.
Okay. And why are you doing this now as a volunteer?
I'm doing this because it has to be done. We have a really small staff of only 6 full-time employees to manage over 10,000 acres of land, and losing one person on the staff doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot. And I was, spearheading projects that were just starting to take off, like building the acclimation pens, the invasive species program. I had all of that knowledge, and when I was lost, that went with me too. Even in my short 8 months out here, I was doing a lot. So I have to show up here and still supervise, the interns that are out here and work with people to pass on that knowledge if eventually I'm not able to get reinstated. So.
And Bianca, by definition, volunteers are not paid. So how are you making ends meet?
Well, I've applied for unemployment. I'm still waiting to hear back on that. The process for that is pretty slow. Until then, I'm just going to be relying on my savings. Yeah, that's it.
Well, Bianca Sisich, thank you for your time, and keep volunteering.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That does it for today. I'll be back with another edition of America Decides Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report, that starts right now.